Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 3, Episode 3 of You. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, we are in the aftermath of the craze around Natalie's situation, where obviously, because of Natalie's disappearance, has gotten a lot of news attention, even to the point that a reporter was trying to get a comment from Matthew, so he knocked over one of the sprinklers so he'd have no choice but to come and check it out. But even then, Matthew doesn't say anything. And obviously, Love is stressing out about it, which Joe responds like, well, thinking to himself, is like, right, you've always had fixers to make your problems go away, so of course you'd be worried, because it's the first time, like, you've been like, well, because that's what I'm still like, yeah, the whole situations from last season is like she definitely had somebody fix that for her as well, and hence why she doesn't want to tell Joe like what actually happened to him, because she probably didn't do the best job of disposing of him if she did on her own, but I don't think she would know how to on her own. But obviously this is our first time like really being neck deep into body disposal and covering up a crime, that it's like she's kind of scared and worried. But Joe's like, no, it's fine. She's like, oh, it'll probably blow over in like a week or two, and she's like, yeah, I wish they just kind of move on to a different story. But then she's asking Joe like, how can he be so calm? For him it's like, well, the fact of the matter is he killed a comedian last season, so it kind of puts you in a situation where it's like, you kind of been through this before, of killing someone enough in the public eye for it to be an issue, and worries and concerns and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, Joe is just saying like, right, we don't need to frame the husband or anything like that. It's actually better if we like don't frame anyone, because if we just make it seem like, oh, she just left and disappeared, then this will kind of blow over in no time. So till then, just like live a normal life. And it's like, right, just gonna have to, do that. So Love goes to the bakery, Sherry and her cronies run in, and they're just like, oh, like Natalie, do anything between her and her husband? It's like, right, we didn't really know them that well, which is something that they got across when the cops interrogated them as well. It's like the cops really had anything. We but they don't. They were just asking your standard questions, so everything's good. But Love's dealing with that fact of just kind of like them being like, yeah, like Sherry and them being a part of like, right, we're gonna make a statement about, like, no, they're like kind of almost like a neighborhood watch, but they're like a group looking into Natalie's disappearance and stuff like that. Because obviously it's like, oh, we've listened to enough crime podcasts and stuff like that, so they've already created the narrative that it's Matthew who did it. To be fair, most situations, most crime dramas would make you think, oh, the husband did it. Statistically, it ends up being that. But, so that ends up being the case. So Love just doesn't really add too much fuel to a fire, because it's like, right, don't try to pinpoint anyone, just be like, yeah, I didn't really know him that well, but hey, here's some stuff I made. It's keto friendly and gluten free and stuff like that. You guys want them? Well, fine, we'll get one. So at the same time, you have Joe dealing with the fact is he goes to the library and obviously getting acquainted with his new job, which obviously is his old job, and he's like, oh, this is the perfect place to just be normal. Then he gets introduced to Dante, and obviously the whole conversation about white woman syndrome, and it's like, what's that? It's like, oh yeah, because of the coverage of, yeah, it's just like, yeah, Natalie, a white woman disappearing, definitely has a lot more coverage than other people would be. And it's like, oh yeah, like Joe was kind of almost like not sure what it was, but then he was like, oh yeah, obviously. And then she kind of goes like, why is it obvious when it's something that you didn't know before? It was like, oh, you fell into the trap, dude. Because he's almost like looking, he's like, right, did I say something? Did I fail the test? He's like, it's just kind of like, oh, right. And so obviously there's continued news footage and stuff like that, because it turns out, because like Love brought it up to Sherry and her friends about the last interaction she had with Natalie, was Natalie setting up this bakery, and now the news is running that. They're like, yeah, this bakery right here or at least the last talk was about her leasing like a bakery to like her next door neighbor who lives over here. And it's like, Joe's like, all right, damn it. Then the cops call him because they want to continue talk. And it's like, right, like, did you not really have a relationship with Natalie? It's like, oh yeah, while you were getting diapers or whatever, like, why did you two have an extended conversation like this? At first he's like, oh no, like, just saying hi to a neighbor. I would have admitted what was kind of apparently that, well, he ends up telling the truth, but you could have easily lied and been like, yeah, she caught me almost asleep, but it's like probably the camera footage would have shown that you weren't asleep. So he's like, oh, I'm sweating, and he's thinking like, right, I can't be on the phone with Love either because they're going to take that as like, oh, see how I am on the phone and kind of judge my behavior from that. And because Joe is who he is, he's playing out the scenarios of like, I can't do this because they might realize that. So it's like, right, they're just fishing. And so he was super open about it. He's like, right, a man, a wife, stressed out, with the baby and everything that, came to like, and he basically admits to jacking off. And they're like, yeah, just don't do that again. He's like, right. It's like, and it wasn't a complete lie because he was there jacking off thinking about Natalie and like envisioning them having sex. So I love it because he was like, yeah, she gave me the condoms as kind of a joke. And now that kind of fits the narrative of like, oh, what that could have potentially been about. So got them off his back a little bit. But sadly, before this, I think Love was having a conversation with Theo. It's like, man, that kid will not back down. I'm like, he's definitely going to become an issue as the season progresses because he has a thing for Love. Now, I don't know what that's stemming from, like whether it's some like thing of like, oh, I have a thing for an older woman, whether it's just kind of like maybe it stems from his complicated relationship with his own mom or something like that. But it's like there's something there. And obviously when Love is talking to him and gives him that carrot cake, cupcake, she's like, oh, like, yeah, it reminds her of like, her brother, because she used to make those for him and all. So I'm wondering, like, where he kind of looks at her probably from a position of like maybe there's kind of like a mother complex he's kind of got going on when he looks at Love, and maybe when Love looks at him, she just thinks of 40. So it's not even like but even this, she kept being like, yo, stop flirting with me. I told you not to flirt. He's like, no, I'm not flirting with you. But he's like, I don't have my wallet, so could you, my lady, my savior for hooking me up with some food. But her even trusting him to close up when she has to go to the hospital with Henry, I think that's so interesting. Because I'm like, don't trust that guy. Technically, your shop is a crime scene. I mean, you clean things up. Plus, you got a cage down the stairs. So it's like, because that's all set up in the bakery, isn't it? If their cage that they made, I believe, not unless that's a different area. But I assume that was in there as well. But regardless, I'm like, that kid could have gone snooping. I mean, it's like there's a spare key, which now I'm like, I'm going to be worried because that kid could have easily snatched that spare key or even made a spare of said spare key. It's just like, I just get the feeling like he's going to be able to walk in there whenever he wants to. To be fair, he did ask to like kind of work there whenever he wants to. So I'm just screaming that kid's going to die by the end of this season. I just know it because it's like you're too neck deep in all of this. I mean, granted, Ellie was able to walk away from this situation like not dead, but I'm just thinking like, yeah, this guy is I don't think it's going to work out for Theo, which is going to be super sad. But obviously, when they get to the hospital, they find out that Henry has measles. And obviously Joe, he's like, despite everything he's ever been, had a gun pointed at him, all the stuff he's ever been through over the course of the series, and what scares him the most is knowing Henry's in this condition, knowing how bad the measles can get. And obviously, like, he thinks because Dottie's the hippy dippy person that she is, it's like, right, did you get Love actually vaccinated? And she was like, yes, I did. Like, don't question me on that. So they're dealing with all that, and even Joe's kind of thinking like, right, this is my punishment for all the stuff that he's done. Like, yes, I've done some stuff, but I'm trying to be a better person. And it's like, so you have to get better. He's thinking like, just because of everything I've ever done, you're suffering from it. This is my punishment, because that's always the sad thing of like, it's unfair because it's like, you're like, I deserve the punishment, but then someone else gets punished in your place. Like, that's kind of what Joe's thinking in this regard. Love has a blowout with her mom because her mom doesn't want to give her the money for the bakery, even though she said she would, but rather she's planning to take that money and actually apply it to buying a vineyard. It's like, oh yeah, like this is a better thing. And it's like, oh, you'll find the money, you'll all work out. She's like, oh, you're amazing. She's like, come on, like, don't be like that. Like, don't get angry. She's like, no, I'm not angry. I'm actually enlightened. It's like, now I kind of realize like why on some level I feel the need to try and like go after Sherry's like acceptance. It's like, yeah, because it's a mirror of our relationship, just like Sherry, she referenced Sherry being a quote unquote stabbing you in the back like some, what was it, effing stealth cunt is her words exactly. I was like, wow, I wasn't expecting that. But it's like, yeah, why I'm trying to like get love from Sherry or like her approval is like a mirror image to our relationship, because like Sherry was immediately like, oh, Love, you're trying to call everyone about the measles. Well, don't worry, I'm gonna cover it for you. And Love's like, oh, I appreciate it, but I'm gonna handle all of it. And then she's like, oh my God, that little guy. It's just like, could you just not? because I mean, the moment the whole Natalie thing happened, what did she do immediately afterwards? Like, her and her husband, like, she's taking, like, kind of, like, Instagram influencer, well, momfluencer, obviously, like, pictures. So I don't know if at that point she was going like, oh, like, hashtag Natalie come home at that point. I don't know, or if that's just later on. It's definitely much more obvious later on, but at that particular post where she was looking at stuff about Natalie and then took, like, a picture with her husband, I don't know if that was, like, one of those, like, hashtagging it. But, you know, that's also a commentary on, like, there was a thing, I remember someone talking about it a while back when, like, I want to say there was something going on. I want to say maybe it was like an earthquake or something like that. And that models were taking, like, very sexy photos and then hashtagging, like, oh, thoughts and prayers for people in these situations. Like, don't, you know, and it's like, yeah, it might be kind of a little, I mean, I'm sure it runs even deeper than that. Like, it's not just that specific example. I think there are a couple other examples you can kind of think of, but that's one that always sticks out in my head of just kind of like, don't do that. Because it's like, kind of read the room kind of like thing of like, yeah, I mean, this is supposed to be like the parody, yet almost not parody, because it is like, it does happen. It is the most extreme example of it, but those extremities do exist to the point that it happens enough for you to go, is it even the most extreme example of an influencer, or is it just kind of like, it's an example, not like, it's like, not all influencers flow like that, or are that, but like, obviously the more extreme ones you kind of like read and know about, like, fit that narrative. But like I said, are they the extremists, or is it just like, it's not that extreme, it's closer to the extreme angle without necessarily being I don't know, it's just interesting to think about. Aside from all that, Dottie ends up leaving and being like, oh, you're so angry, which Love actually is. Obviously we had the whole conversation about like why they both have so much anger, and yeah, like, obviously this stems from, I mean, they both have mom issues, truth be told. Like, both Joe and Love have big mother issues. I mean, truth be told, doesn't that end up being the biggest reason why most people, I mean, I guess daddy issues is kind of leans to, like, in some regards. Like, I think mother issues tend to, like, I mean, it goes hand in hand sometimes, I think. I feel like you hear about daddy issues more than you hear mother issues, but I mean, you know. But regardless, obviously now the bakery's on the news and everything, and Love is like, okay, we got to do something about this. And so Joe's like, right, I agree. We got to frame Matthew. I have that blood cloth. I kept it of Natalie's just in case of this. And she's like, go ahead, do it. And, you know, he goes and does it. But then he starts sweating and is like, oh, you're sick. And at first I was like, wait, do you actually, like, did it actually come from you? Did you get, Henry sick? But it's like, no, the other way around. Like, Henry did get him sick, but then he starts hallucinating and seeing another version of himself, and it's like, oh, why don't you just hop the fence? He's like, no, there's cameras everywhere. It's like, well, Natalie told you the cameras were broken. So, because he obviously kept getting worried about Matthew, because like Matthew just seemed like he was so okay, because even Love is like, yeah, he's still acting a little too normal, and even is like, yeah, I know. Joe was like, I know why I'm acting normal, but why the hell is he acting so calm? And then he happens to look up and he sees Joe, and you're like, does he know something that Joe doesn't know? Like, does he know about him and Natalie? Like, what's going on? And in his, like, fever of it all, like, Joe jumps the fence, but he's cutting back and forth between, like, thinking about Henry being dead, but also he's in the nursing's office, and then he, like, it's him as a kid again, and in his mind, because he wanted to protect his mom, but being like, no, my mom was a good mom, he's like, oh, we don't see anything about your vaccination, so he never got vaccinated for, like, the measles and stuff like that. Wasn't all his vaccinations, because his mom wasn't with the upkeep about that, and it's just Joe's like, oh, because of that little lie, like, here you are right now, like sick right now, and your son's sick. Well, that's besides the point, but it's like, you're sick right now because of, you know, that lie. And it's like, yeah, you're trying, like, no, tell that nurse the truth, like, oh, she wasn't a good mother, she was a terrible mother, in fact. And Joe's like, it doesn't matter, it's too late. And his older self starts attacking him, because I think that's after, like, he was in a hospital, and it's like, because I thought it was interesting, because, like, it was foreshadowing that next scene, but, because it was like, Dottie was like, Joe, are you vaccinated? And it's like, which almost like, I think it's just the timing of it, because we're talking about measles and not the C word COVID. So like I think it's just like the parallels are just like but I think the point is it's like not being vaxxed, because it also turns into an anti-vaxxer conversation, not even just about COVID but also just about things like measles. It is something that isn't that common, it is something that is usually kind of it's kind of like getting polio. I don't know if there's never been a case for polio in the past decades, and if there are, it's probably just not. It's super uncommon because that's a disease that was kind of wiped out because of vaccinations and stuff like that. Once again, I'm talking from a place of it's not common enough place, but I don't know if I could say it's completely gone. There might be like super, super rare cases, or maybe it is completely wiped. I've always been under the impression it's been completely wiped off. Like it's not an issue anymore, but you never know. So it's more a conversation on that, but like I said, just the parallels, because they even bring it up in the show. They're like, oh yeah, COVID. So it's like, there's parallels and commentary, I guess you can like, it's a commentary just on anti-vaxxers in general, but I think in this particular case, like you can draw parallels to the whole COVID thing, but I feel like if they wanted to lean into the COVID thing, they could have, but they made it measles, because that is something that is more like, oh, like no one gets measles. Like that's what they're trying to, like, it's more so on that front, so. But regardless, but yeah, like, I guess subconsciously he kind of, like, even in his fever pitches, like, realizing, like, that's what the next memory was supposed to be, like, oh, like, you've known subconsciously, but you never realized it. You probably buried this memory. And lo and behold, who's over him? And it's like, oh, it's Matthew, because Matthew found him, like, hopping over the fence, and it's like, how did I get here? And it's like, yeah, it's like, does he know anything? And because he was asking about that, it's like, oh, yeah, Natalie told me you guys were becoming good friends, you share wine. He's like, fuck. And it's like, do you have any idea what happened? Did she say anything about going to her sister? It's like, oh, he doesn't know anything. I gotta love that Joe's like, yeah, I'm sick. And, but interestingly enough, it's like, yeah, I got measles. Like, my son has measles. He's in the hospital. But it's like, yeah, he plays dumb about the whole Natalie thing. It's like, yeah, she didn't really say anything. But he talks about, like, right, my son being sick. I didn't get an update on him like I'm hoping to. And it's like, do you think they're suffering, like, are they being punished for our sins? And I forgot what Matthew was really saying, but it was really interesting kind of having that perspective. Essentially, he was talking from his experience of, like, yeah, he wanted to be a father, but it still kind of came as a surprise to him. And obviously, like, him and he's like, yeah, Theo was a good kid when he was younger, but then you take into account the whole aspect of, it's like, yeah, he has his issues with his mom, and he kind of has to live with me just by default. But it's like, he wants to try and be a better, like, parent, and it's like, yeah, everyone wants to be it's like, yeah, wanting to be a good father in the end. Because for him, it's like, he got so caught up in being ambitious when he was younger, that so he wasn't really there for Theo, and now potentially trying to make up for that time, I don't know, it put things in perspective for Joe, and he was just kind of happy to know, like, oh, Henry's okay, because, like, his fever broke, so everything luckily worked out. It turns out he was, well, also, like, Joe, spending this time with Matthew, is like, man, Matthew's a good guy. He is a man who just legitimately just misses his wife. It's like, I can't frame this guy. This guy's too much of a good guy. And it's like, right, go talk to the media. He's like, I don't want to talk to me. He's like, no, talk to the media. Like, the fact of the matter is, they're going to paint, if you don't tell them your narrative, they're going to paint a narrative of their own, and you want to be there for Theo. You can't be there for him if you're behind bars. It's like, that's so interesting. And then as he's leaving, it's like, oh yeah, like, next time, like, hopefully I don't find you next to my trash can. Goes over there and finds a scarf, and it's like, yep, I'm not going to frame you. And even Love changed her perspective on it, because hearing Theo talk about, like, being there for her, like, comforting her, because she was like, oh, Theo's not okay. And even the fact is that he talks about his relationship with his dad, because his dad's not the most, like, embracive, like, emotionally, and he's like, yeah, you think even with your wife missing that you might be, like, might be admitting emotions, but he knows, like, deep down, like, yeah, my dad must, like, be burying all that. So hearing things from both Matthew and for Love, she heard it from, like, Theo's perspective, made it go like, man, I don't want to ruin things between them. Like, obviously, like, trying to have a relationship, they're trying to, and it's like at the end of the day, it's like, right, I don't want to, we don't, like, and Joe's like, I did it, but then I took it back, because it's like, what kind of people would we be if we did that? And Love completely agrees. He's like, wait, I get it. It's like, can you be a good parent if you're a bad person? It's like, both of us don't want to be bad people. We just want to be good people for Henry. It's like, it's not only I'm feeling that, but Love, you're feeling that too. It's like, this is great, So obviously time went by. Like, there, first was the vigil, and you had Sherry and her crew doing their thing. It's like, it's so disgusting too, because they pick up 2 flowers from the vigil, 2 sets of flowers, and they're taking photos. Like, oh god, could you be any more disgusting? It's like it was already bad before, like, because they were even on the news being like, yeah, she was my best friend, and Joe was like, you hated her, we loved her. It's like, it's just nasty and terrible, because she was kind of the outcast amongst your little clique, you know? So, but Matthew finally makes a statement. I even love at the end of it all, like, Sherry was like, that's it? You know? Because they try to paint the narrative to that. Because Matthew made it clear, he's like, yeah, Natalie, if you're out there, like, come home, or at least let me know you're okay. And if something did happen to her, whoever responsible will be punished. And it's like, oh, that's a little foreshadowing, and just kind of like, oh, you know, pretty thick threat. Just a heavy threat, you know. But then like a week later, it's like, oh, things seem like they're kind of going back to normal. It's like Joe went over to bring something over to Matthew. It's like, oh, you know, he's like, yeah, I'm expecting a call. So he's like, yeah, things kind of returned to some form of normal. Like, it seems like we're just kind of moving past it and everything. So, but ultimately, that dad, who's actually a pretty decent dude, because Joe was actually kind of like, oh, I like this dude at like the party from last episode or something like that. It turns out, because Love, he's the only, his wife is the one, was it Meredith? Like, his wife is the one, like, Love talked to before and warned about the whole measles thing. It turns out they're kids, because Love was reading something about anti-vaxxers, and it turns out his wife and child, they're the ones where they're the anti-vaxxers. And it's like, wait, it's like, yeah, like, my wife just was so shocked because she didn't realize anyone was going to get sick. I mean, it's like, yeah, we just don't believe in, like, injecting our kids, but we don't fight with anyone that does. And it's like, and like, Love is just pissed. I was like, calm down, Love, just let him get his stuff. And he's like, okay, he's about to leave, because he's like, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it all worked out. It's like, well, to be fair, Henry's situation could have gotten really, really, really bad. That got bad, because it wasn't only him that got sick, it's also Joe as well. But still, like, her mother instincts are just kicking in, like, no, my baby was sick. My baby could have been in a life-threatening situation because of your choice. And so as he was leaving, I was like, okay, just let him go, Love, just let him go. And she's like, hey, and he's like, huh? And she hits him with the roller pin. I was like, no, why did you do, Love, no, you and your anger issues. Now I'm wondering, like, okay, because she doesn't want Joe to be like, what the hell are you doing? She's probably going to try and take care of it herself, and she's probably going to try and use the same tactics they used with, Natalie to try and make this dude disappear too. I'm like, oh, come on. We literally just got past one fiasco, and you've kind of died. We've been driven right into another one. I'm like, oh, Love. Once again, it's like, she hates being called impulsive, but you're so impulsive. It's like, you let your anger get the best of you in that moment. It's like, you shouldn't have done that. You, like I said, you literally just got over, like, the hump of, like, ooh, like, there's nothing connecting you to the crime. And the cops did find Natalie's ring. Now, whether anything came about that, once again, we got there a week later. And so Matthew is like, yeah, I'm expecting a call now. Whether that's work related, whether this is connected to Natalie, whether he's still looking into that, who knows? But this sure as hell doesn't help. So, like I said, I'm curious to find out whether Love tries to handle this by herself, or whether she does bring Joe in. I think she's going to handle it by herself, just so Joe won't, like, she's like, I don't want Joe to look at me like I'm a screw up because I keep messing up. So we'll see. Once again, I hope this doesn't lead to us going down the ending I was bringing up before. I hope it doesn't have, like, a Hemlock Grove ending, because, like, to me, Hemlock Grove has one of the most depressing endings. I mean, those last 3 episodes of the final season are just, like, the most depressing, because, like, everything kind of goes wrong. I'll leave it at that. If you've never seen it, I won't reference it. I won't spoil anything, but it's just, like, to me, those are just, like, that's the most depressing-ass ending, like, in general, with just everything that went down. But regardless, I'm really interested to see where everything ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.